Well, I'm going through the thread on EnergeticForum devoted to Clarence's replication of Barbosa and Leal, the two Portuguese inventors who seem to have duplicated Nathan Stubblefield's Earth Collector. I don't know why he called it. Oh, because when you do a patent, you have to lie a little, fudge a little, so that to throw people off. He never called it a collector. A battery in private to friends among him, mingling with him. He called it a collector. And that's what Barbosa and Leal call their device a captor, something that captures electrons and accumulates them. Anyway, built along the lines of the principles of Edward Leedskalnin, or the perpetual motion holder that Edward Leedskalnin popularized. He did not invent it. There's some talk. I'm halfway through the thread. It seems to be around 40 plus posts. No, 40 plus pages of posts. And I'm halfway through at the 400th post, page 26, I think. And Clarence speaks of he's working on developing a methodology that disregards or swaps out the grounding rods with some other system, because he did make allusion in a prior post to Nikola Tesla's Pierce Arrow car being funded by this very setup. But instead of grounding rods, of course, he had aluminum plate several inches across on the back side of the car, so as the collector. And we know Tesla had already had a patent on collecting energy from the ether, but grounding it to the earth, it was a different patent, a different idea. Anywho, what was I going to say? There was a point to this video and I forgot already. I took too long to wash my dishes. You get busy, it's hard to remember the thought. There was something that impressed me. I might as well sidebar here. All of Clarence's attachments were removed at the same time, 8:12 a.m., something like that, on the 26th of March of this year, 2016. I'm sorry I came to it as late as I have in December of 2016, because now all the attachments and the photos and the diagrams, or whatever it was that Clarence refers to, are not there. And I have to go on what other posters have posted, which is not much. Anywho, but it's something. But it's not the original. So something happened to make him run and scurry, and I don't know if he's going to post any replies anymore, if he's the one who left and took everything with him. And he said he had a lot of inside information, some stuff that other people don't have. We're just going to have to reinvent the wheel somehow. I don't know. It's like Marvin Cole, just picked up and left, but not for the same reasons, probably in all likelihood. It sounded like he had a working system. Oh, I think this was the idea. I don't know why people are so hell-bent on keeping things the way they are, the status quo. I mean, here they are trying to... Clarence's replication is predicated not on the ideology of Barbosa and Leal's patent, but on a specific embodiment. And that is, keep all of our AC devices, our 60 or 50 cycles... habituation, and just substitute a new source for the grid source, in place of the grid source. And that doesn't make any sense to me. Preppies don't do that. Preppies have rewired their whole house for DC, and they have their solar panels and their battery bank, and they run all their appliances off of DC. And a lot of them can be run off of DC. Nathan Stubblefield, he ran a variety of DC and AC devices off of his earth energy, and his earth energy device, his earth collector, was not an AC system by any means, yet it had all the earmarkings, the hallmarks, the signature of looking like it's the same conceptualization as Barbosa and Leal. So, in fact, there's even a diagram in Chapter 3 of Patrick Kelly's book, in which he goes over Barbosa and Leal, and that's where I stumbled across it, I think. If not initially, that was the second step. I think that was initially, but whatever. Yeah, it was. That was the first. I don't know why I was looking in Chapter 3. That's a reason I have long since forgot. Not long since. It's only like 2 days ago, but I've forgotten already. But it's in Chapter 3 there, and there are diagrams that are very evocative of Nathan Stubblefield's Earth-based telephony, in which you have a loop coil and 2 grounding stakes in the Earth as your pickup coil. And there was a demonstration to, I don't know, put a bar magnet on the inside. It creates a current. I don't know. But it just, when I saw that image, I thought, oh God, Nathan Stubblefield all over again. That's pretty obvious. You know, you read over the concept of their device, and it sounds very similar. So the input energy, and you do need input energy, doesn't have to be a whole lot of watts, which implies the possibility that it does not have to be a whole lot of amperage either. In fact, they're saying that it should be somewhere in the vicinity of an amp, more or less, for your input energy. And then what you collect from the Earth is your business. But the voltage has to be precisely the voltage that you want to come out of the Earth. So it's exactly what I assumed it would be. Voltage-oriented, very little amperage, but it's the voltage that matters, not the amperage. The other thing Clarence kept saying is that the RMS voltage on the inverter has to be matched with the RMS voltage coming from all of the grounding rods collecting the voltage charge from the Earth. And that's something I don't understand, because I don't know what RMS means. So I'm going to have to find out. But he was referencing the Earth as one voltage point to measure, and the other point to measure was to act as a reference was the inverter that's running off of his single battery, although he wished he had about 3 or 4, because his battery keeps going up and down so drastically. Yeah, about 4, I think. He was using like a car battery or something. So something that's easily chargeable and dischargeable, rechargeable and dischargeable. But he was matching the voltage coming off the inverter. So the inverter is the standard that they're using to judge by. And of course that's high stakes. That's really pressures people. And then they're talking about, oh, we got to make a smaller system. Well, yeah, but not off of an inverter. And Clarence was saying he was having difficulties, but I don't know, maybe he succeeded further on down the thread. But how hard can it be? I mean, I don't know. What do I know, right? But just for ideology's sake, voltage in is what matters. Amperage does not. And here I've got a sleep circuit shorted out through my earthing bed sheet so that I've already got the amperage suppressed with 6.6 gigaohms of resistance on a AA battery. And that isn't good enough, so I short it out through the earthing bed sheet so that my body doesn't have to have any amperage going through it. And then you have to ask yourself, well, what good is it if you short out all the amperage? Because it's the same concept. Only there's the collector is scaled down to 1 grounding rod, because I didn't know it matters how many you have. I mean, I did try this a long time ago, but I didn't notice any benefits, and I didn't wire it the same way. In this case, I'm not sure. I'd have to. Yeah, it's not the same. Oh, and I don't have a transformer core. But I used to do that with my earthing life.info series of experiments. So What I see, basically, is that I should have no trouble with proof of concept once I get done reading through the whole thread, and I am waiting till I read through the whole thread. I'm scanning it at this point. I'm just looking for Clarence's posts, because that's all I'm interested in most of the time. But it should be no difficulty at all to do a proof of concept utilizing natural sources for my energy input. You know, a natural source for a voltage difference, maybe a tree versus the earth, for my input, and then, or maybe a few trees, whatever, and earth as a singularity. But then the collector can be several trees. And I have floor flanges from the hardware store that I had already wound, but now I'm going to have to rewind them. And I'm going to have to get magnetic winding wire. And then decide whether or not I'm going to use iron, floral enameled floral iron wire from the hardware store, or whether I'm going to go with copper, because I never liked copper. I always preferred iron. But iron improves the magnetic... that's because when I did the Biocircuit of Bliss, I never had coils of wire, and so I substituted an iron core winding with just iron wire. But I did have capacitors made out of picture plates, glass plates, that go into picture frames, and aluminum foil. So I might have to go to copper wire, even though I'm not crazy about copper wire. The effect on the body is not very pleasant. And that doesn't surprise me because, I was wondering why, Clarence did make an allusion. I think he dropped a hint and nobody got it. I'm pretty sure nobody got it, but I think it was a hint. He told a guy to clean up his circuitry. It's such a mess, he could put it in an aluminum box. Well, an aluminum box is a chassis, and all you need is another piece of aluminum inside, insulated from the box, to serve maybe as a supporting structure, or just something you throw in there. And now you've got yourself two floating plates of a capacitor, creating the ambiance of an electrostatic field inside your project case, which will help collect more electrons and collect them from the device and recycle them. And this is the principle that Jim Murray used in his SERPS device. Now, he used an acronym, Clarence, and I don't know what the acronym stands for. I'm guessing it means you're creating your own microgrid when you're doing this experiment, and that would be a reasonable assessment of what he was implying when he used that acronym. It was something like SEWR or something S, I don't know. It wasn't SERPS, it was something else. Anyway, the whole idea of a SERPS is to not send the electricity back to the power grid so hastily, but hold on to it for a little while and reuse it. And that's not a bad idea. It certainly doesn't violate any laws of physics if you can pull it off, and Paul Babcock and Jim Murray has. So, I think this version of Edward Leeds Skolnin's perpetual motion holder does just that. And Paul Babcock did put up a demonstration of a perpetual motion holder, a very big one, off on the side for us to toy with during breaks of the 2013 conference in Hayden, Idaho. And it was quite an interesting device, just to marvel over, how does it work, So we may never know, but how do you harvest it and put it to good use? And that's what I think has happened here with Barbosa and Leal. I've said this before. Okay, so I'm saying it again for emphasis. So we have a collection, a magnetic collection inside the transformer core. Oh yeah, I have floor flanges from the hardware store that are quite large. I got them off of Amazon and I haven't used them yet. And I have some smaller ones that are zinc plated, but I have some that are not zinc plated, and they're just iron. So I'll have to decide what winding wire to use, and I'm just gonna have to rewind them because I have 18 gauge wound around it, and that might serve as a as the secondary, but as the primary, it's just not enough windings, and it's not thin enough gauge. Although they were using 21 gauge, I think. Yeah, but the insulation was enamel, it wasn't rubber, so they didn't have so much spacing, that's right. With an enamel insulation, there's going to be no capacitance to speak of between the windings on the primary. But there is capacitance on the secondary because of the heavy-duty insulation on the heavy gauge wire. Very interesting. This is something I never analyzed. I never got out of the analysis. But when you shift between a heavy gauge, plastic or rubber insulation versus an enamel, the capacitance between the windings is going to be vastly different. So you're literally setting up capacitance on the pickup coil, on the secondary. Huh. Interesting. I don't know what to make of it, though. This is something I got out of Josh's, Patansky, I forget his name. He worked with Eric, maybe he still does. One of his lectures, I think it was the 2014 conference, he brought this up. And it's and this is the true nature of a Tesla coil, is the capacitance between the turns, the windings on a coil of wire. And you have to space it. You have to create an armature to create spacing between each turn. And it's a regulated spacing. You have to be very consistent to create capacitance between each turn, each turn of your coil winding. But that's an air core to be able to be more responsive to higher frequencies. Because this has an iron core, this is going to be lower frequencies. And yet, Clarence was talking about, he wasn't talking about very low frequencies. He seemed to imply somewhere in one of those posts that the Earth energy is a higher frequency than the 50 or 60 cycles that we want to get out of this for our devices. Because somebody brought up the subject that higher frequencies would be more power. They were questioning Clarence's method. Say, well, Clarence, if you did it this way, wouldn't you get better results? And he's just saying, dude, do it my way and then monkey with it. Replicate my way first. So few people, it's amazing. And this is what I don't did anything. They just talked, but I still can't imagine why they're pressuring themselves to do an AC system. I don't get it. Proof of concept is all you need, and then all the jammering would cease. The jammering, questioning the veracity or the honesty, for that matter, the honesty of Clarence. Like Clarence doesn't know what he's doing, like somehow he didn't do it, he's just claiming he's did it. Why doesn't he take measurements to verify that to himself, if not to anybody else, that he's done it? But he knows he's done it. He just doesn't come out in so many words. But no, he did. There was a specific test he did, and it's really easy, and it's experiential. It's not based on measuring anything, but he did use a measuring device, his watch. And he timed it. He said, okay, how long will it last strictly on the battery, and how long will it last with the battery assisting? And it lasted quite long. I mean, with the Earth assisting the battery. It lasted quite long by comparison to battery alone. It wound down pretty fast. So, I mean, what more does it take to figure out, It just means he didn't have enough ground rods. For only a certain... No, he actually could run his device off the ground for a very long period of time. Yeah, his only problem was he didn't have enough grounding rods because the ley lines, or the geomap, the magnetic map for his area indicated that it was very poor magnetic in his area. So he said you should go and find out what it is in your area. And somebody else who was beginning to replicate his work had much better magnetism in their area, and so they didn't use so many I think he used only 10 grounding rods or something, something ridiculously less than the 60 or so that Clarence was using. And he got pretty good results, pretty good readings. So Clarence said, well, all the good luck to you. Obviously, Clarence did not have that situation in his area. He had to work a little harder. Okay, grounding all those grounding rods. Yeah, I think this was the reason why I started this video. One idea I had before I ever read anything much about Barbosa and Leal, certainly before I read about Clarence's contribution to this thread on EnergeticForum devoted to his replication of the Barbosa and Leal. And this is that the spacing on his grounding rods, Clarence's, is 3 feet apart. And there's a specific reason for that. And it has to do with what you're doing is you're replacing a plate, a two-dimensional surface. You're taking it and substituting it with the earth. And this is what I had imagined, and so now it's verified. Just a minute here. Dr. Pramod Vora took one sentence out of Dr. Robert O. Becker's, Otto Becker, MD's book, The Body Electric, not to be confused with Bob Beck. He took one line, one sentence, and replicated Becker's work and bested Becker's 90 days to regrow the last digit, half of the last digit of a finger by taking only 21 days. And he did it by poking holes where he wanted the growth to occur, making blood come out, instead of like hacking off, amputating the end of the finger, smashing it off. Because Becker always dealt with original wounds. He never dealt with old wounds that had healed improperly, leaving a stump and a scar and a mangled, situation. So Dr. Pramod Vora dealt with people who were in a severe accident. Their hand, let's say, became mangled and became a stump with scar tissue. And so he had to deal with the reformation or regeneration of an old wound instead of a new one. And so he developed this technique of the first couple weeks poking holes to make the blood come out, and then keeping the blood moist with a gauze dressing at all times, changing the dressing, and making sure there was colloidal silver in that wetness, and only poking for a couple of weeks, but changing the dressing for several months, however long it took. And it was the fresh blood that's provided the growth, the production of stem cells at that local vicinity to regrow the tip of the finger. And it worked in much better time, much more quickly than Becker dealing with a fresh wound. And a whole wound, like an amputation or a big, huge, gaping hole. So maybe the body was in a better position because it wasn't undergoing so much shock. But you had to shock the body to reawaken its desire to regenerate, because otherwise it just wants to take a shortcut route and just patch it up and forget about it. Well, the poking holes, the polka dot approach of creating a spread of holes across the area in which you want growth to occur, this is exactly what I see happening here with the grounding rods, especially now that I see that Clarence admits that they have to be spaced closer together, not farther apart. The standard in the industry is 7.6 feet for a 7.6 feet apart for a a 9-foot grounding rod or an 8-foot. Well, Clarence said use an 8-foot grounding rod. Maybe it was a 6-foot grounding rod. I think it was a 6-foot, 7.6 feet apart. Anyway, whatever the length of the grounding rod was, they said it had to be a certain percentage, and they calculated 7.6 feet. And so they're telling Clarence how to do his job, and Clarence said, no, I tried everything. I tried 100 feet apart, 50 feet, 30 feet, 10 feet, 3 feet, and 3 feet worked. So, this tells me that you're trying to fake a spread. Because when we look at General George O. Squire's use of trees as antennas for his army field radio operators 100 years ago, they put a mat on the ground to act as the ground, and they hiked up the tree 2/3 of the way to hammer an iron nail into the tree to act as the antenna. But around the tree, they would put a wire mesh screen that served as their ground for their radio. They didn't hammer anything into the ground, and they didn't use the tree as the ground, interestingly enough, because trees are grounded. They're grounded areas. But he had a separate ground of a mesh. So that's a spread. That's a square area spread. That's not a singularity grounding rod. And this is the reason for the multiple grounding rods, is especially now that we see that they're closely spaced according to Clarence, is he's creating a spread. And so somebody conjectured, well, maybe we should be burying a plate in the ground or something or other. Well, if you had an interconnecting latticework of copper, he was using copper-plated irons grounding rods. So if you had copper-plated iron piping, if there is such a thing, or just copper piping, and you made, like an irrigation network, but it's closely spaced, 3 feet apart, crisscrossing, because you're not irrigating, and then bury that a minimum of 6 inches deep, you would get the spread, in all likelihood. But it doesn't diminish your spread. It just makes it a different way. But the concept is a spread, because that's what he alluded to when he talked about Tesla having an aluminum plate on the back end of his Pierce-era car, insulated from the chassis of the car. And in those, somebody made note of the fact, or he did, that in those days they had the battery the other way around. The negative didn't go to the chassis of the car. The positive went to the chassis of the car, which he thought was significant, that he was using a positive for his grounding lead. That might have to do with the circuitry of Barbosa and Leal. Connecting your positive output, I think it was. No, yeah, right. Because the input is something else, possibly. Anywho, I'm not sure about that. So it's pretty obvious it's a square, how do we rate this? Obviously it has to do with the magnetic strength in that area. How much magnetism is in the area that you're picking up? Yet, I'm alluding that it's electrostatics that you're actually picking up, because it's a single wire. So you're converting magnetism into electrostatics at your point of pickup, at your point of reception, with all these grounding rods. And if that's the case, it's very inefficient. All you need is to collect the electrostatic field surrounding the circuit and boost it and recycle it, contain it, such as the chassis of an EV Gray motor. It'd save you a lot of trouble. Of course, it makes the device dangerous to work with if you don't know what you're dealing with high voltage electrostatic components undergoing operation, obviously. Anywho, so I think, this is conceptually a doable thing. It can't be that hard, but especially small scale. And that is, I always like to use my body as my primary instrument of testing anything, proof of concept. And there's nothing wrong with redoing my earthinglife.info experiment now that I know how to do it, using Barbosa and Leal and Clarence as my indication. I just wish I had Clarence's photos and diagrams, because they're all missing. But I'll have to make do with what the other members there had reposted of his concepts and go with his response to those posts to determine which ones are accurate and which ones are false, because he did say that this one guy, Bro Mikey, I think, was busy trying to act as secretary, and he's busy drawing up his version of the diagrams and posting them, and Clarence either approves or disapproves. So at least I've got something to work with, and we have something to work with, despite the lack of attachments, the total lack of attachments that Clarence says in his posts are there, but they're not. They're gone, and all at the exact same minute. On the same date, they were all removed at the same time. Unfortunately, we have a vast body of knowledge removed, and seemingly a pipeline to the only person who successfully replicated Barbosa and Leal, which is as close as we'll ever get to somebody who successfully replicated Nathan Stubblefield. Because if I'm not mistaken, John Bedini did not. He admitted that Nathan has never been replicated, which would include himself. I could be wrong, but that would be a find in its own right if anybody replicated Nathan Stubblefield and came up with results better than a mere battery. He called it a battery for a reason, because he didn't want anybody to know how to actually replicate him. So he said, well, if you fail, then it'll act like a battery, and a very weak one at that. That's why he called it a battery. But privately, he called it to people among them that he was giving a tour. He called it a collector. And it's not in the patent, I don't think, to bury it under the roots of an old oak tree. I don't think it is. And wait a year. So if the grounding rods are 3 feet apart, I can't use a forest, and I can't use an orchard. It won't be possible. Unless the tree somehow maximizes its receptivity to the point that it's far superior to a grounding rod, it can make up the difference. You know, its massive roots, usually its spread of roots, normally they don't spread any further than the drip line of the leaves surrounding the branches of the tree. So you just take a plumb bob reading straight down from the edges of the bushiness of the tree mass of leaves to determine your circle that you can draw on the ground of where your root mass ends. But I think it goes a little beyond that. I don't think that's a hard evidence of where the root mass ends in terms of diameter surrounding the trunk of the tree. I'm sure it goes a little farther than that. I could be wrong, especially when trees are trimmed. But it might be right. I mean, it might be that the drip line is the limit. But you got this huge surface area of all those little root hairs coming off the roots. And that's a lot of surface area. And Clarence did say, so the surface area of the grounding rod matters. So it's like you've got a bigger grounding rod. And he said, it doesn't matter how deep you go. You know, oh, I got to reach the water table. No, 8 foot is good enough. And he hammered his half a foot below ground level so he could mow his lawn above that. So he had a big lawn. Obviously. So the grounding rod went 8.5 feet down below the surface of the top surface of the ground. You know, it would really make things, well, if you had a bulldozer, you could just bulldoze out a big, excavate out a huge, humongous hole in the ground, which is your grounding rod field, and then take your dirt and put it in a big mixing device, cooking up an imaginary scenario here, and mixing that soil with something that won't break down, let's say aluminum shavings, closely enough so that volume of aluminum shavings so that they're closely spaced with each other, and now you've got a field of aluminum shavings And all you need is one grounding rod, and all that field of aluminum shavings is your spread. But if you wanted something better than that, obviously not aluminum shavings. That was the hard way to go. No, and just an aluminum screen. Yeah, you just bury an aluminum screen so many inches below, I guess, 8 feet below the surface of the earth, and hook it up, and there's your grounding rod, and you get the square area that you need, the spread, to be sufficient collection. It's almost as if the energy is streaming out of the earth at all points, and so you need a collector dish. This is sounding like a satellite dish, doesn't it? So you don't need all those grounding rods. That's right. It's more like the functionality of a satellite dish. You don't need it to be parabolic, obviously, but you need the back piece, and then you need the focal point that picks up the focus of the back piece, if it were being reflected. So what if you simply took a very large mylar sheeting and created a parabolic dish in the area, the square area in question, mapped out by the number of grounding rods spaced 3 feet apart, that creates this square area? And you point it downwards at the earth, you prop it up a few inches above the earth, and let's see, it would have to be more than a few inches, wouldn't it? You have to be several yards high, which is a wind problem. So now you do have to dig a shallow hole to accommodate the centerpiece of the satellite dish that will receive the focal point of what the satellite dish is picking up. Now that's presuming that it's not a magnetic pickup, that it's electrostatic. Well, no. No, satellite dishes do pick up electromagnetic. Isn't that what they're designed for? I don't know. Is that electrostatic or electromagnetic? You would think it's electrostatic. I mean, I would. Somebody else would think it's electromagnetic. You know, not being an electrical engineer, it looks to me, by a single point contact, that's an electrostatic pickup. That's right. In fact, all antennas would be electrostatic in nature. I could be mistaken, even though they do a conversion in all likelihood to electromagnetic almost right away, I would imagine. You know, no, this starts to sound like... It does. It sounds like... Oh, wait a minute. A coaxial cable. Yeah, but this is a grounding. No, but see, it makes no difference. If it were coaxial cable that you laid down in a grid work to create the area in question, then you have to directly connect the coaxial cable to the closed loop, namely the number 4 wire in the patent, Barbosa and Leal patent, because it's already a loose coupling, not at the point in which it loops around this number 5 wire that's coming from the grounding rod, looping around, creating a loose coupling around the number 4 wire. Instead, you've got the loose coupling at the point of the earth point of inception. It would be a hell of a lot easier than grounding rods, that's for sure. And more similar to Eric Dollard's crystal radio initiative, in which you lay down coaxial cable, but he only did a single length, like, a mile long or something, which would amount to the same thing. You could even coil it. You could spin it around. Yeah, you could take a single coaxial cable and lay it down, bury it in the ground in a ditch, in a spiral pattern, consuming the area that the grounding rods would have consumed, just following the trail, because they would have been connected by a single wire. there's a separate one, obviously, of 4 grounding rods in the center that are hooked up to the opposite, whatever you call it, reference of the inverter. But the 28 or what was it, 56, the 56 grounding rods are all in a single line, connecting line, in series with each other, and so that could be a coaxial cable buried in a ditch and then directly connected to the loop, the closed loop wire, the closed loop secondary going around the 2 toroids. Could be done. That might be doable. Coaxial cable is easy enough to get a hold of, and digging a ditch a few inches deep might be a little more doable than driving a grounding rod into the earth, especially since I don't think I would be permitted to put grounding rods into the soil. So a coaxial cable that's removable makes more sense, to me anyway, is more doable. That's starting to make sense. It could be done. It could be done. Now, Tesla said that his collecting plate for that patent that I started off my earthinglife.info series of experiments, the aerial collector, he said it should be insulated, a plate, an insulated plate, which is interesting to say the least, because that makes it electrostatic. Of course. Of course, it makes it electrostatic, because you're putting a dielectric covering on over the surface. And that means the source of the energy is the other plate. And that's right. So actually, his collector showed that he had a capacitor down below, another capacitor, but a full bridge capacitor, if we can call it that, in which one plate is connected to the aerial and the other plate is connected to earth ground. And then in parallel off of that capacitor, he runs pulse-oriented motors, because the energy will be coming out of that capacitor in the form of pulses. So, this is interesting. Where was I going with that? Oh, so it is electrostatics. That's right. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it was electrostatics. Dang. So we're being very not efficient using grounding rods. No wonder Clarence was bitching how he wasn't going to increase it to 80 rods, even though he knew he needed 20 more, especially because when it rains, the performance drops, and rain would short out. Oh, of course. Damn it! It is electrostatic, because the water shorts out the grounding rods, making an electromagnetic connection between them. He's got a spread creating an electrostatic field of all those 60 points, each point being a singularity, a grounding rod. He's creating an electrostatic field among his grounding rods. And he has to do that because it's the electrostatic field set up between the rods in the soil acting as the dielectric. That electrostatic field that he's forming, because all the grounding rods are connected together, so it's the soil that's acting as the dielectric. So he's got a singularity of a plate. The soil between his rods is acting as a dielectric, creating a catch-all, a catch basin. The soil is acting as a catch basin, an electrostatic catch basin. This is very significant. And this is instead of a humongous insulated plate buried underground, because it would be the equivalent, but it probably wouldn't be so large. Not necessarily. Well, no, I think the problem is the moisture content of the soil means you have to have a bigger plate. While if it's an aerial-oriented system, it can be a smaller plate because it's, not subject to moisture if it's not raining. The story of Tesla's Pierce Arrow car, it wasn't raining when he was driving it, so it could short out the functionality of the electrostatic orientation of the collector plate by creating a conductive surface of water on the surface of that plate that would short out the electrostatic field on the top side of the insulator to that plate, on the air side. Yeah, I know, pure water is supposed to be a dielectric, but it's more likely going to short anything than it is going to insulate, because there tend to be impurities in water anyway, even rainwater, acting as an electrolytic ionic charge or carrier system. Plus the water is moving across the plate when it rains. That's conductivity right there. Convective. This is getting to be very interesting. So you see, this really ties into the EV Gray motor, the electrostatic field of the chassis surrounding that motor. This really ties in. But creating an electrostatic field in the soil among the grounding rods, that's the whole point of bringing them in to 3 feet, is to be able to create a charge. Otherwise you can't create an electrostatic charge. It has to be, because the rain is shorting it out. That's why the rain doesn't work. Yet. But it shows that the rain is acting, the water is acting as a dielectric. But it's a mix, it's a blend. It's acting as a dielectric, but it's also acting as a conductor. And it improves the conductivity of the soil. The presence of the moisture during a rain improves the conductivity of the soil, diminishing its resistivity, and thus diminishing the dielectrical quality of a drier soil. So soil is somewhere between a resistor and a conductor. It's a semiconductor. And it's changing that semiconductor status of the soil that's changing the characteristic number of grounding rods that Clarence needed for his system to operate year-round, regardless of whether it was sunshine or rain. Now that we got that figured out. I love these fireside chats. Fireside? Where's the fire? Well, my cell phone is shining at me. Oh, yeah, okay. Only if it's picking up light. Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, I have to provide the light. Oh, there it is. Whoopsie. Wrong way. There it is. There's my fire. My fireside chat. Okay. Oh, you notice I have better lighting. I put in a light bulb. A light bulb had gone out, and I replaced it with a bigger light bulb. So now I got lots of light. Whee! I can read if I want to read a book. Oh my God. That'll be a change. I've gotten out of the habit of reading. I think I've covered everything. This is really thought-provoking. So I got 20 some odd more posts, or 20 some odd more pages of another 400 posts to scan through. And I will get to the point at which Clarence will probably say in a huffy voice, "I'm leaving," and take all my attachments with me. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but I probably will. Or else the posters will comment, "What happened? He took all his attachments with him." So at least there'll be some chatter. They don't, unless they come up and replicate what he's done, I don't have much nerve to patience to sit and read their posts, because I only want to hear success stories. I don't want to hear all the stammering, questioning the veracity of Clarence. I'm not interested. I don't have the patience for that. I may be accidentally missing a few people who are working on replicating his work, because I know they are, but so far they haven't gotten very far with their development. So I'm not taking the time to read to see how far they've come. What I could do, there must be some way to do a search and filter their posts out of the thread, so I get a collection of just their posts and scan through those. There may have to be a way to do a search to help streamline the process, because there are a few that are sincerely, and he commends them. There's one guy, actually there's only one guy that I've found so far. I should do that. I should try to focus on that one guy and try to do a search for all his posts in that thread to see how far he got with his replication efforts. Because most of the people are complaining they don't have the money. There's a money issue, and I just don't. Money is never an issue. All that's an issue is I was living out of my ex-honey's car for 3 months, and I managed to ground myself to the earth. And my biggest expense, and it was her money that we went to the hardware store to spend, $11. The biggest expense was, it was either $6 or $9. It might have been $9 for the wire clippers. That was the biggest expense, was the wire clippers. The rod and the hex nuts and the wire was very cheap. It was like a couple bucks. I just didn't have wire clippers to cut the wire. But I managed to create a grounding system so I could ground my body and sleep better at night, even though we were living homeless in her car on postage stamp quantity of funds. You know, it's not like we had a whole lot of money, and especially out of her pocket. You know, how much would she be willing to spend, right? Yeah, she's not into this stuff, and we had limited funds as it was. Oh, my battery's about to go. This is as good a time as any to stop blabbering. All right. Here's a very, very important thought. If you look up on Rex Research, the page devoted to Barbosa and Leal, down at the bottom there's some links and some synoptic quotations from those links that have been translated into English. And they state that Barbosa and Leal were criminalized for certain types of activities, and there's even a YouTube video from Next Now, or Now Next, I don't know, and a couple of versions of it, and the lady is saying, oh, just as quickly as the inventor comes on the scene, they get off the scene. He's Stanley Meyer, poisoned. And this, you know, she doesn't say anything about Barbosa and Leal, but on Rex, maybe it didn't happen yet. Maybe she was warning people, you know, like warning us about the weather, upcoming weather front. So, hello, hint, hint. Sorry, it's not nice to laugh about somebody else's tragedy. I'm not. I'm laughing about how ridiculous it is that the weatherman usually doesn't do a very good job of predicting the weather. Unless they're telling you what they're going to create. You know, chemtrail spraying, the weather they're going to create. We're going to create a murder, and just to let you know. No, a criminalization, just to let you know. No, they're not going to warn you about a murder. So, it's, and the grounds of the criminalization had something to do with a dispute with the power company, which of course is a municipality, just like the railroads were taken over by Lincoln during the Civil War to gain control of transportation. So that he nationalized the railroad system. The power companies have been incorporated into bureaucratic government to regulate them, which means that if you do something against the power company, you're doing something against government. Now, we already know that if you do something to the airwaves, the FCC gets involved, so you have to be careful that you don't create an electrostatic noise that disrupts radio communications. But, so what I'm getting to, why do we have to do AC? So I already said this in the other segment of this video. I'm going to attach this to the other one, because this is significantly similar. Why do we have to do AC? If we do DC, that has nothing to do with the power company. Does not involve them. Why are we so lazy to simply maintain the status quo? Presumably we needed AC for transmission, yet for long-distance transmission wires are not AC, they're DC. And we're not told this. We're told in our little textbooks, oh, everything's AC because it transmits better. Yet the high tension wires over long distances cross country are DC, from what I recall, from what I've heard and read. So why do we continue to use AC, at least in our ideology, especially in our homes when it's so disruptive? You know, AC field, it's disruptive. I slept in my car, my DC-powered electric car with the ignition on all night long in a parking lot away from all the buildings. I slept like a baby. I am so electrosensitive. I can't handle an AC field very well. And I would like my building, whatever building I live in, to be DC wired, as it is. When the power goes out in the neighborhood, I meditate very good. I have the most clear meditations, no thoughts. You know, in TM vernacular, it's called smoke. When you've got a lot of thoughts, and it keeps you on the surface of the mind, thinking, and you can't seem to relax too well. Yet you are, you just don't know it because you're busy thinking, just on a more refined level of worrying. In other words, it provokes anxiety, tension. Not that you don't already have to have the tension for it to provoke, but it just makes it worse. So, why do we have to go there and tempt government to come after us like they did after Barbosa and Leal? Because they were catering to companies, manufacturing firms. They were going to set up stuff so that a manufacturing plant could augment their power by not having to take it from the grid. So you can imagine the power company going, whoa, that's a lot of power there that company's going to be saving themselves at our expense. And the whole point of the power company, most people don't know this, it's the same purpose of the IRS. It's the same purpose of city governments acquiring golf courses. It's to take money out of circulations, to regulate inflations, to prevent hyperinflation, and thus keep the golden goose laying the golden eggs of fiat currency at the federal level between the Treasury and the Federal Reserve. That's the main premise to the power companies, to take money out of circulation. It is not to give us free energy. Don't expect them to, because they got to charge you. It's not because JP Morgan is greedy because he can't meter it. It's because J.P. Morgan was involved with the Federal Reserve, and he knows what the purpose of the power company is for. It's to take money out of circulation. If they billed us for what we actually owe them, it would probably be comparable to the postage stamp to mail us the bill. That's how ridiculous it is to believe that the utility company is actually charging you justly for services rendered, or what services could have been rendered had they made use of more features than they already do for, augmenting their system off of the earth and off of, free energy. But they already do. They just don't tell us to what extent they do. They probably keep it down, their costs down to a level that's reasonable without going too far, because they don't want to appear too obvious that they're doing anything weird and out of the norm. So they hide what they can, and anything they can't hide, they don't do it. But what they don't hide is the billing. Hello, bill collector, knock knock. How would you like your pet to pay? I don't. But I don't have a choice, do I? Oh, you've got me by the balls. Ooh, and if you don't have balls, we got those too. Clarence had this thing he kept saying. Oh, I want to repeat it. It was a little blunt. Oh, he's funny. That Clarence is good as Orion. Anyway, so why do we have to maintain the status quo? It's ridiculous. And then be in competition with government, with your local municipal power company, who wants to take money out of circulation, who wants to charge you, who doesn't want you to do anything that competes with them. So don't compete with them. Don't encourage strife and contention. Why? You want that? You want the sweat to come off your forehead? you know, and off of other places you don't want it to come off of? Why would you want that? Sorry, I just can't help myself. Why would you want that? Why don't we go back to DC? It's safer, you know? And then, and then we can scale it up from toy models, proof of concept toy models, and scale yourself up and be more manageable instead of sweating all kinds of, you know, rocks and pebbles over trying to duplicate what Barbosa and Leal did, what Clarence did of Barbosa and Leal, which makes so much effort and pressure. Oh, I'm so pressured, I gotta... And then nobody does anything. Because it's like very formidable and scary. See? They've been brainwashed by watching too much TV not to do anything to ruffle anybody's feathers. Okay, so why do we have to do it that way? Straitjacket ourselves and duplicate everything exactly. Who needs AC power when it's not even good for you? You know, I couldn't get over the fact that Clarence was using a microwave and they're talking about, oh, how he cooks. He tries to be economical and not, or healthy and not cook too much. And nobody even mentions the health hazards of a microwave. They're just saying, well, it costs a lot of energy. It consumes a lot of power. Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm sorry. I can't help but criticize. Because this is important. We should not try to duplicate what's in place. It has no business being here in our life. AC power sucks. Just read The Body Electric. This is what got Dr. Robert Otto Becker, MD, his funding cut in 1980. And his associate has the 60-minute episodes on his website. The very instances in which they came out against AC fields. They are wrong for the physiology. They mess up your stem cells. They turn them into cancer cells, especially when you're under the age of 10. But, hell, why shouldn't they do it when you're over the age of 80? When your system is weak and vulnerable, just like you were when you were under the age of 10. What difference does it make? Very old, very young. It amounts to the same thing. You're vulnerable to an AC field. And everybody in the middle who makes all the decisions saying, that's a bunch of poppycock. Just don't listen to them. Are you kidding me? These are your children you're talking about. Oh, we must protect our children from naked Vinny. Hello? How about the AC fields? Hello? You got worse things to worry about than me. That's for sure. But nobody listens to Vinny. Oh, he's cuckoo. Oh, really? Go on. Keep making cancer for yourselves and wonder why there's so much cancer. Hello? Knock, knock. Anybody home? All right. There's no reason to anger anybody, and there's no reason to keep in place what's not even healthy to begin with. Let's go to DC, and then we can scale up from small-scale models in a very nice way. You powering little toys. Just take out the battery, you know? Take out the 1.5-volt battery. Or how about that remote you're so busy holding in front of your boob tube, you know? Why not power that with your little scaled-down proof of concept? Come on. Mr. and Ms. Couch Potato, come on. It's time to get snapping here. Come on. Time to get snapping and do something. But, you know, break it down to baby steps. And, I got to do it that way. No, it's impossible. I'll just sit here and watch TV. Hey, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to connect my body to it. If I can do that for proof of concept to my satisfaction, I've already done that to the extent that I developed over at earthinglife.info. Not quite Barbosa and Leal, but it was partway there. I didn't realize it. I didn't know. I didn't know about Barbosa and Leal. I knew about Nathan Stubblefield, but I didn't know how to put that into operation because I didn't know the principles involved. Now I know, after studying Mark McKay's analysis of EV gray motor, I know how to analyze this properly. So, we apply that standard by which to judge what Barbosa and Leal has accomplished, what Nathan Stubblefield has accomplished, by Mark McKay's analysis of the EV gray motor. It's on the internet in only one location. Actually, no. I posted in 2 locations my copy of those analysis files that somebody else had on their website. I think he's in some foreign country. I forget which one. Because it's very significant how Mark McKay breaks it all down and analyzes the EV green motor. And this is the standard by which to judge Nathan Stubblefield and Barbosa and Leal. If not also Tesla's special generator, his tri-metal generator. I'm still working on that. It's not clear. It's still fuzzy. But these other stuff, it ain't fuzzy. It's very obvious that an electrostatic field has a lot to do with it. But when you get that involved, then the analysis makes more sense. But why? But when we have this freedom of choice, why stick with AC? It makes no sense. It's cocky. It's so cockeyed. It makes no sense. Cockeyed. Yeah? Cockeyed. Ooh, cockeyed. That's a funny eye. To have a cock in your eye. Oh, no. He said the C word, Mommy. This is not for 13 and under YouTubers. Oh, my God. Anyway, you get the point, I hope. He's so noisy. No, forget it. This is getting ugly. You want my teeth? Oh, I'll give you one of my teeth. Okay, time to get snapping here. Oh, I can't even snap my fingers. Dang it. Dang it, I want to take a rope and hang it from the highest tree. The next line I won't repeat. Boo, 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 boo. Was it Cat Stevens? I don't know. I think it was somebody else. Okay, enough already.